It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harver.
Hey, welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Mike Harver. Today's episode is 31, episode 31. I'm excited to have in studio with me my friend, my buddy, my SEC cohort of all sports, Rick Morris. Rick, how are you doing today, my friend?
That's right. I've been promoted. Look out. I'm in a new chair. No, I'm so excited to be here. We had a team vote, and we voted Paul out of co-host, and now I'm the co-host, and he's the in-studio guest, and I couldn't be happier or prouder of that moment. So
yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the old show, and I haven't watched it in years, like Survivor, or now I like to watch Shark Tank. I mean, Paul didn't make the cut, right?
He didn't. He did. When he brought out Tina Yothers, we had to have a team discussion.
Yeah, he's on probation. He just, hey, lift your game up, man. Come on. No, Paul's going to be joining us here shortly, and we're continuing in our discussion, Rick, around the book Breaking Average that Paul wrote, 7 critical factors for team strong leadership. We're going to shift into a new chapter today around resilience, I believe. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we are going to explore resilience and kind of the first element of that. And really what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our in-studio guest, Paul Gustafson, who we've been teasing this whole time. And we wanted we wanted to acknowledge and show resilience within the episode. And so we thought we would switch things up and see how he liked coming in as the in-studio guest versus the co-host. But let's bring him in right now. Paul, how you doing, buddy?
This is great. I like sitting in this seat, Rick. This is kind of fun. And thanks for doing all the production and just being our in-studio guest pretty much all season long. And now I get to play that role, which is kind of fun. And this is good because we just finished our whole series on ownership. And the truth of it is we've always wanted to create a podcast where we had multiple responsibilities and ownership in that. And you guys have certainly done that. Thank you for co-hosting today. So yeah, excited. Yeah, so story. I'll just kind of set the stage for the story and then hand it back to you guys so you guys can kick it around a little bit. But I think the story that sets the stage, at least in the book Breaking Average, and I'll share it briefly here, and if you guys want to dive deeper, we can. It's a story of my entrepreneur's journey. Really, I had this dream back in college, to be honest with you, to start a business. And I held on to that thing for the longest time. We talked at the last podcast about implementing, as far as ownership, we got to implement the ideas. I didn't. For years, I let it just sit there. I incubated it. It was in the back of my mind. And eventually I found a couple other folks who had also had a dream and an aspiration to start a business. And I asked the question, I said, well, let's do it. If you have the dream and I have the dream and you have the dream, there was 3 of us, why don't we just go explore the dream? And we said yes, but it wasn't just like that, guys. To be honest with you, you guys know, the entrepreneur's dream is a difficult one. That initial piece, super excitement, way high. We were like on cloud 9, ready to rock and roll. And we put lots of props and proposals out there. And I'm telling you, we just got failure after failure, no after no. We were ready to give up. It took 3 years before that business really launched. But here's what's interesting. Early on, probably a year and a half in, we're about ready to just pack it up, saying it's not going to happen. And we're starting to hear the questions of defeat, right? You guys have probably heard these questions. Maybe we can't, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we just don't have what it takes. Those were the questions we were kicking around. And then, I mean, doubt was definitely knocking, and we were just questioning ourselves, and doubt was ready to rob us of our future. But then we asked a different question. We flipped the script, all right? And the question that we asked was, well, who says that we can't? Who says that we can't? And so we started wrestling that, and then all of a sudden the excitement kind of came back, and we're like, you know what? All those no's aren't going to stop us. That's just going to tell us things that maybe don't work right now, but we're going to find a path through this. We're going to find a way to persevere. We've got to find a way to persevere. So we just kind of pulled our bootstraps together, started focusing in on that, and we learned something that's really amazing, that really excites me even to this day. It really is about perseverance. It's really about resiliency. And we're going to talk about resiliency. I wanted to share that story because wherever you're at, maybe you're an entrepreneur that struggled or in the middle of a crisis moment, don't give up, all right? That challenge, yes, it's there, but you can find a way through it. And trust me, and again, there's a whole lot more to this story that I would love to unpack, but I just want to just share at least a little bit of the start, that we had that initial high, then we hit the resistance, guys, the doubt, then we recast the question, we refocused, we decided that, you know what, we can do this, right? Teamwork really does make the dream work. Yes, there's a few night frights along the way, but teamwork makes the dream work. We can tackle those nightmares. We can face challenges together. And here's the thing that I learned, and then I'll hand it back over to you guys. Resilient teams pour courage into each other. That's what happens. That's what we started doing. We found a way to kind of pour courage into it. And when you do that, really, that's the definition of encouragement. It was so encouraging to be able to just say, hey, you know what, that's okay. We'll keep fighting. We didn't win that, but that's all right. What did we learn from that? How can we improve ourselves? What can we do to make ourselves better? Because we're not out of this yet. We are not out of this yet. And we've found a way to go from a dream, an idea, three people to 316 people. And I just want to encourage you guys. I want to encourage everybody that you can do it. Just got to be resilient. So that's the story I wanted to share with everybody.
I love that story, Paul. Thank you for, making it personal, right? So oftentimes, when we get on these podcasts, we're talking about others' stories, other ideas, but this is your story, man. I love the 3-year, we failed for 3 years. We failed forward for 3 years before we started becoming successful. And now, Paul, just to highlight for our viewers on the Empowered Living Show and listeners to the Breaking Average podcast, Paul's company, the company he now co-leads with others, 316 people from a start of 3. Paul, how many years have you guys been named as best place to work in the state of Virginia? I know it's been multiple years in a row now, right?
That's a great question. I think we've got 8 years we've been identified as one of the best places to work in the state of Virginia, and we were identified in Inc. magazine in 2016. So it's an honor. It really is, and it's just dedication from the team. And I think you can build culture when you find ways for people to pour courage into one another, and that's what we're learning. We got to keep doing it, though. Here's the thing. I mean, we hit it 1 year, and then we thought, well, cool, we made it. And then we kind of slacked up. Don't. You can't. Just because you hit it once doesn't mean that you're forever the best place to work. You got to keep working it.
Yeah, and look, for our listeners, this is not like a blue ribbon society where everybody gets one of those ribbons, right? Or everybody gets a trophy. And, we often talk about that nowadays. I mean, to be named best place to work, there are things that you have to do. There are things that you have to continue to do. That's what Paul's mentioning here. That takes resilience, right? Because I think anytime once you get the award the first time, leadership gets harder because now everybody's watching you and say, okay, how can you sustain it, right? Because really leadership is about sustainability. Can you sustain that success? And that's what resilience is. Because Paul, I'm sure, you guys lose employees, you gain new employees, you gain new ideas. I mean, there's all and over the last year, everybody in the world has been faced with COVID. I mean, what kind of resiliency has it taken for many, many people to be successful and sustain things over the last couple of years. Paul, before we go any further, highlight the 3 core elements of resilience that we're going to talk about over the next few sessions.
Yeah, so the 3 core areas I think are really important. You got to acknowledge the threats. We're going to be talking about that today. Mike and Rick are going to lead us through that. You have to persevere through the middle, right? So when I told the story of Cementions, we had to persevere, and you've got to persevere as well. That's part of the journey, is perseverance. And then you've got to have that vision of overcoming. You know, we say overcome in the end. There really is no end, to be honest with you. It's the infinite game. But it's really, you've got to have that vision of overcoming, and you got to celebrate those successes, the small victories that you talked about in our last podcast. Those are the 3 elements.
Yeah, that's good. And Rick, let's bring you back into the discussion here. APO, acknowledge the threats, persevere through the middle, overcome in the end. I know you got some great stories to add around perseverance as well, because you've been in the showbiz. What kind of perseverance does it take to overcome and persevere in show, or have resilience in the showbiz?
Well, in the entertainment industry, it's nuts. Not only just what it takes to actually to make something happen, but the amount of people that try to either stop or thwart that along the way. So it's one of the craziest businesses I've ever been a part of. I enjoy still doing it just because it's a little bit different than what I do in my normal business day to day. But yeah, it's some of the things that just occur. But think about, throwing an event, right? If you've ever thrown one large event, think of then doing that in 50 cities around the world, right? On tour. It's literally all the things that could possibly go wrong, and it's one of the funniest things. I think the coolest stories, and most people get it wrong, that came out of that was how smart Kiss was. Or I believe can't remember who it was now. It was either Motley Crue or Kiss or something. Anyway, the green M&Ms. Who was the green M&Ms? Van Halen. Van Halen, the green M&Ms. They had such a technical setup, though, that most people take that as, wow, they're being crazy and eccentric, and these writers have gotten out of control, and some of them are because of that. But when they said no green M&Ms, when they were walked into their green room, that was what they looked at first. And if there was any green ones in there, they knew that the writer was not red. Therefore, there could be danger or issues with the setup of their technical setup. They didn't read the writer, therefore they didn't get everything that they were supposed to get to, and a whole risk management team would jump into it. So it was brilliant to do something like that, because how particular and how well did they follow that plan? So anyway, yeah, entertainment industry is crazy.
I did not know the story. You're talking about green M&Ms. I'm like, where is this going? You were making me hungry because I love M&Ms. Hey, for our listeners, real quick, we want to invite you. We're always looking for leaders that we can talk to. Visit us on breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. And also, we would love for you to leave us a story of your own resilience, like your own overcoming story. Maybe we highlight that sometime on one of our shows. You could certainly send that to us as well. Paul, do we have a sponsor for today?
Yes, we do. We've got a great sponsor. I'm so excited to be able to share this bit here. Dave Cornell, who has a business called Cultivate Courage. He co-authored this chapter here on resiliency. And he's kind of the courage expert, and he's gone through it himself. He's got a great story, but I invite you guys. He wants to help you and encourage you. He's got some tools and techniques that will help all of us. We all face fears, guys. It's a reality of life, and he helps folks kind of work through that. And courage is not the absence of fear; it's the presence of faith, really, I think. And he's got a really powerful message. So he's a speaker. So if you need we brought him in the Cementions and actually shared a workshop on courage, really powerful. So if you need that, he's willing to help out. He's obviously a coach. He's an author. He's got a great book out there. But you can reach out to him. Go to cultivatecourage.com. So Dave, thanks for being a sponsor today. And we featured him on a podcast a couple months back on courage, so check that out as well. But cultivatecourage.com is his website.
Right on. That's good. All right, let's dive into kind of the meat of our topic today, resilience, Paul. What does resilience mean? Why is it important?
This is great. Resilience, so important, right? I know you guys are movie buffs. We always talk about movies. You guys have seen The Matrix, right?
Of course.
Somehow it made it in our movie selection. Somehow it made it
in there. So,
I still don't get that, but yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, so you got The Matrix. There's Neo. I'm going to bring him up in a second. You got Captain America. I love that. Or Wonder Woman. We can name a bunch of them, right? Here's what's cool. Their eyes, right? Neo, Captain America, Wonder Woman, their eyes are always on what threats are coming on them, right? So they're aware of the threats. And there's something really interesting. I think for a leader, we need to be aware of the threats that are happening in our world. We've got to be, all right? Because if we don't, then we're either ignorant or we're just lazy, okay? But when we take notice of the threats that are happening, then we can do something with them. Neo is dodging the threats. He has to see what's coming. Captain America is shielding the Wonder Woman, all that. But in the same way, the leaders, we have to face it. We have to acknowledge the threats. When we acknowledge the threats, then we can activate courage. This is something that Dave Cornell, who's our sponsor, he shared with me. Hey, when you acknowledge the fear, when you acknowledge the threats, you can activate courage, and courage always leads to resilience. You can't have resilience without courage, and you have to acknowledge the threats. So it's really about a mindset, Mike. I think it's really important. The team needs to see that leader take that step. Here's the truth of it, right? We have threats and we have risks, but we've got to be able to step forward in those. Team needs to see the leaders through hope, through the courage he or she is willing to take, and in turn, this is what's cool. The team will be courageous too. If the leader's courageous, then the team can be courageous. All right? This is kind of the law of the picture stuff. But that's what we've learned in our business. I think you guys have learned that too. When we choose to be resilient every single day, we can make progress. We can make progress. So that's sort of the tie-in for me. That's what resilience is to me.
Yeah. I love, again, this is a great topic. I don't want to get us all off topic, but behind me, if you're watching, I have a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and it talks about all of his failures, right? And then, bam, President of the United States. It lists 9 failures that Lincoln had, to include a mental breakdown. Like, he had to be hospitalized for a mental breakdown during his life. And then, boom, 1860, elected President of the United States during one of the most difficult trying times in the history of our country. That's true resilience, right? And resilience is about thriving and endurance in a positive direction. Really, that's kind of what it is. You got to have like this mission, this vision, this something that's bigger. And that's really kind of what I think about resilience. Rick, how about you, man? What do you see as resilience, and why is it important? Why is it so important for us today?
Well, I love the first step of resilience, which is to acknowledge. As we talked about acknowledging fears, for me, I had to acknowledge my personal attitudes. And so, we read these self-help books and these feel-good stories, and you share quotes about Lincoln, and you got Lombardi behind you and all this stuff. And I think a lot of people believe that they can't be off or can't have something go wrong. Like, everything's got to be perfect, especially in the world of social media, right? People only put their most perfect thoughts out there, or ways to show them in the best light. I had to learn, and it's something that I coach people to acknowledge the feeling that you're having, because it exists for a reason. And that could even be the feeling of doubt that you went through, Paul, and those questions, right? If you didn't acknowledge the questions of doubt, then you couldn't get to the resolve or resilience of the question of the future, right? And you didn't come up with that new question of, why can't we? Right? For if you didn't acknowledge that you were feeling that you couldn't in the first place. And so I have to do that from time to time, where like I have planned a creative day and I sit down and I'm just not creative. Like, the thoughts aren't coming. I have to acknowledge that feeling, and actually sit in that space for a time. Now, I don't wallow. You don't sit there forever, but I go, okay, I'm feeling this. I get this. All right, what am I going to do differently then? Can I pull myself out, or do I just need to switch gears and move something else? But I think the biggest thing that acknowledgement helped me with, though, is when I was having a day off, maybe attitude, maybe it was grumpy, maybe things weren't going well, was being able to acknowledge that to my peers or my kids even, right? And go, hey, I got a lot of stuff on me. I'm feeling like I'm not dealing with the issues that are coming. Right. It's almost a pre-shot warning. Like I'm about to snap if y'all don't stop. No, but whatever that may be. But I think acknowledgement is so important for growth. Even like when somebody misspeaks, like we've all made mistakes, and cancel culture is this big thing going on right now. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge, hey, I didn't say that correctly, or that didn't come out appropriately, or I didn't intend for that to be a consequence, but to try to gloss right by it, or to act that it was a perfect decision or that you're in your right mind, I think it really, really hurts. When I was talking about politics with my daughter, I said, the politicians that drive me crazy are the ones that say, I never believe this. I always supported this. My favorite politicians say, you know what, you're right. 6 years ago, I did say that, but I've learned, I've grown. This is my new perspective, and this is what I believe in now. I've been educated. That to me is that acknowledgement that I'm looking for that says, all right, they are resilient. They can persevere, versus being steadfast and saying, no, I always believe this. I don't know what you're talking about. That's a liar. You took it out of context. So I think acknowledgement is one of the most important factors of being resilient.
Yeah, that's good, Rick. I love the story of the pre-shot warning to your kids. Literally just last night, I kind of had something similar with my kids. As I said earlier, I think resilience is endurance with direction, right? And in learning, we're on this podcast, we talk about learning, right? I'm one of those hangry guys. The commercials where Joe Pesci needs a Snicker bar, right? I'm that guy. And so we've been moving. My family's been moving. We sold our house. Well, yesterday I was hangry. Like I hadn't eaten and we'd been moving. I'm tired. And so we finally got dinner. And after I finished dinner, I told my kids, I said, okay, I feel human again. I have something I need to talk to y'all about. Aren't you glad I waited until after I ate, right? That's me letting them know that, hey, I've got something hard I need to talk to you about, but I didn't do it when I was hangry. I waited until I'd gotten some food in my belly, because if I'd have done it earlier, Rick, like I might have said things that I didn't want to say. I might have lost them. I wouldn't have led them well. But see, I think that's what real resilience is. It's learning from our past mistakes as well, but continuing to go forward, right? Having that endurance with direction. I know my direction is to lead my family well, to lead others well, but I need to also acknowledge, as you said, Rick, acknowledge things that hold me back and make sure that I don't make those same mistakes going forward. And I think, to me, that's what real resilience is. It's not quitting, but it's also not making the same mistakes over and over again, and hoping that things change as well. Paul, let's go one step further. Cultivating it, because it is important, right? It's not, we have to have resilience in our own life as a leader, but how do we then cultivate that in the lives and minds, hearts of others?
Yeah, I think it's just being real and honest. It's being authentic. It's being vulnerable, right? So Brene Brown talks about vulnerability. When we're there with our team, we need to acknowledge the threats, the concerns, the apprehensions, the fears that are there, that they're experiencing, and not belittling it. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, there are times where I just will push it aside. I'm like, I ignore it. I'm like, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Don't ever say that, guys. As a leader, never say you shouldn't feel that way. All right? Because that's how they feel. Acknowledge how they feel, and then work with them on that, right? Be aware of that. This is getting on their side of the beach ball kind of thing. But stay calm. Stay calm. Bug's life. Go around the leaf, right? Stay calm. Just help them through it. It's just a mindset of being having a victor mindset versus a victim mindset. And then teaching that to other people, because we talk about the law of the picture all the time. It's so critical. How you behave they're going to mirror that. So if you have that Victor-like thinking in the midst of the challenges that you're facing, Houston, we have a problem. This is Jim Lovell out there, Apollo 13, right? He still stayed calm. He acknowledged the threat, the challenges that we're having, and he had a whole team work feverishly to solve that so they could come back home. All right? That's how we are as leaders. We acknowledge what those challenges are. We can teach that. And I love, like the agile approach that Rick and I talk about a lot. We ask the questions, what are the impediments? What are the impediments or the threats or the challenges that are holding you back? What can I do to help you? All right? So when we get that mindset of being willing to serve and help other people, then we're acknowledging it, acknowledgement, which is key, but then we can take that next step of empowerment and being able to get through that. So that's kind of the why for me, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts, guys.
Yeah, I think what I teach is to ask the question, how did I contribute to this issue, problem, result, whatever that is? But search for that acknowledgement, right? So if I'm wanting to transfer, in every single situation where there's anger involved or a major issue has occurred, you contributed something, and you have to acknowledge that. You have to understand that, and that's where growth happens. Even when you're like, "There's no possible way," could you believe that? Like, how did perfect example. I just had somebody at a semi back up into my car, right, into my baby, into my dream car. And obviously that was frustrating. I was like literally in a full turn lane. There was nowhere I could move. Guy just backed up into me. The first thought I had, honestly, after being like, I can't believe you just hit my car, was what could I have done different? Like, how did I contribute to this? Maybe I pulled too far forward to where I didn't give myself the space to be able to back up or move or whatever. It was a learning opportunity. But you asked the question, how do I contribute to this issue? When I started speaking, I wanted to share successful stories, tips, right? That's what we do. We want to inspire. And what I didn't realize is I was putting success after success after success, and it sounded like just an egomaniac story. There was no connection to the audience whatsoever. What I started to do then was tell about the failure that led to the success, and acknowledged where the idea came from, and acknowledged how I had messed something up in order to create that system. And that's what created that connection to the audience. So it's not just about resilience. I think acknowledging humanizes as well, and acknowledging allows people also to ease. We do a thing called lessons learned in project management, and a lot of times it becomes just a big blame session. I call it the project blame game. But I always lead that session with all the things that I could have done differently to prevent it. And when somebody brings something up, the first 2 or 3 ones, I'll contribute and go, no, I feel like if I had done this a little bit better, or if I had communicated this, then this wouldn't have been an issue at all, right? And I'm kind of taking that blame on, and you'll watch that whole team shift and begin to acknowledge things that they could get better at, versus try to find out why, blaming somebody else as to why the project went awry. So I think asking yourself, how did I contribute to this issue, or what could I have done differently, is the best way to transfer this.
Yeah, that's good. I actually think the best way to cultivate this idea of resilience in others is blame them first.
Yes,
right? It's one of my, and I've probably mentioned this 100 times, so forgive me, but one of my favorite books, first book I ever read, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the principles in there is seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? I think that's a key to cultivating resilience in others. And Rick mentioned this a little bit. Seek to understand what others are thinking, what they're feeling, what they're going through. And look, I'm coaching Mike Harbor right now when I talk about this, because I often miss this. I can't remember if it was Paul or Rick that said, don't get over it. Just don't worry about it. Let's go on. I struggle with that, right? Because I'm often seeing the future, and I don't want to sometimes acknowledge what's right in front of me, that there are obstacles. And so I create my own resistance, right? As a leader, I'm creating my own resistance because I'm not slowing down enough to seek to understand. And so to cultivate resilience in others, I've got to be willing as a leader to slow down, listen, acknowledge, seek to understand, so that then instead of saying, hey, just get over it, let's move on, I can inspire them, maybe with a story such as Rick shared, maybe a story of my own resilience, or reminding them of something we've done as a team in the past that when we first stepped into it, it was hard, right? What the biggest thing in change resistance is people hate change, but they often forget all the changes that we've been through as a company or as an organization or as a team. And so they resist that change. But as a leader, if I can slow down a little bit, remind them of all the things that maybe we've resisted in the past, but that we've worked through, and now we do with ease because we actually were resilient and endured through that in a positive direction. I think that's one of the greatest ways that we can cultivate this idea of resilience in others. Any final thoughts, Rick or Paul, before we kind of move into the tip and challenge for today?
I love the quote around change there. I remember this time the Project Management Institute was going through a huge change, and they were revealing that to kind of the leaders of the organization. And it was a volunteer guy, Dan Tootin, that was doing this. And Dan was just getting railed on by people. And it was frustrating me because I knew he was a volunteer. I knew that this was something that he was leading. So I remember I went up to the microphone and I said, well, I guess everybody loves change unless it's happening to them. So Dan, thank you for all the work that you've done. I know you're a volunteer and just appreciate you bringing this to us. And that aligned me. The president of PMI, as he was going out and retiring a couple of years ago, called me out. It was like 7 years ago, you did that. And he was like, I was never more proud of anybody for sticking up. But my point is you acknowledge the issue, and I was acknowledging the fact that everybody's kind of yelling at you and there's no reason. And that acknowledgement led to, an opportunity for me to work with some great people in the organization. But you just hit me with that, with the change. Like, everybody loves change unless it's happening to them.
Yeah, that's so good. Rick, one of the things you and I do, and sometimes maybe, you're a funnier guy. We try to bring humor to the situation, right? To kind of alleviate the stress of it. I'm more of kind of a dry-witted humor than you are, but I think sometimes that makes people, if they can kind of laugh about it, right? They kind of laugh about it and say, yeah, maybe I need to slow down a little bit. Maybe I do need to acknowledge those other people as well. Paul, what about you, man? Tip and challenge. Why don't we jump into tip and challenge?
Yeah, I'm going to let you guys share the tips and challenges, but I will do this one takeaway. You said something earlier. You've got Lincoln right behind you, and you said that there's a list of things that where he failed, essentially, or he struggled, or the challenges that he went through. And that really hit me because I wrote this down. Lincoln, failures, if you persevere through that, if you're resilient, despite all the failures and struggles that you have, it still leads to success. The path to success is always through steps of failures. All right? Yeah. There's definitely some dog do that we got to step through, but keep going. Just keep going. And I love that because I know Lincoln, he went bankrupt. Most people don't know it, but Lincoln actually declared bankruptcy before his presidency. Walt Disney, bankrupt. All right? There are some greats who have had some unbelievable situations that have happened to them. And yet, you know what? They got back up. And I just want to encourage everybody, you can get back up. So that's all. That's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, so good. Rick, tip and challenge, buddy.
Sure. So first, how long have you been in business?
Myself,
Mike?
Me?
Yep, on your own.
2006, so 15 years now.
And Paul?
21 years.
21 years. And so I'm at 15 as well. Right. And so that's a sign of resilience as well. But a couple of quick statistics here in tip and challenge. 50% of small businesses are going to fail within 5 years. 65% are going to fail within 10 years. 90% of startups eventually fail in general. right? And they say 82% of that fails because of cash flow issues. But when we talk about resilience, the fact that you even want to start a business, if you're an entrepreneur, I don't say this to scare you. I say this to say my challenge to you is to understand resistance and understand resilience and understand what it's going to take to go, because I can tell you what I'm doing today, 15 years later, is not what I started doing. I've switched products, I've switched companies, I've switched ideas, I've switched revenue generating, and I'll hit something, it'll run really well for 2 or 3 years, and then it'll go away. And so that resilience factor of keep inventing, keep going, keep grinding, keep understanding, is what's going to be most important to get you through. And so resilience, the key. But the best part about this, one of my favorite things, do you know how many game-winning shots Michael Jordan missed? Do you know how many?
29 times.
29 is a good guess. You don't know. You just threw that out.
I know that there's a quote out there. I can't remember it.
Yep. So 26 times he was trusted with taking the game-winning shot and missed. But the fact is, you didn't know. What you did know, and you probably can remember, is one of those shots that he hit.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the challenge of resilience. If you don't put up the shot, it can't be the game winner. And you're going to miss. So you got to be resilient to continue to try, because if you don't want that ball at the end, then you're not going to be the leader that really wants to succeed.
Yeah, love that. And wasn't it the great Wayne Gretzky that said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Great quote. Great quote.
Yeah, that's really what resilience is all about. It's facing the fear. It's real, right? You can't. Fear is real. Acknowledge it, but do it anyway. Jump anyway, right? Take the step anyway. I love that idea, that story you shared, Rick. You and I are learning that we're more similar than we are different. Even though you vote for, or you like Tennessee Volunteers. I don't know why, but. We've both been in business 15 years. We've shifted the way we do our business. Like when I started my business in 2006, I did strictly headhunting, recruiting for healthcare level, C-level executives, right? I don't do any of that today. Everything I do today is coaching, leadership development for healthcare organizations. So complete shift in from what I started to where I'm doing. And you mentioned like the failures in the first 5 years, Rick. I've had 3 of those now, right? I'm in 15 years. I've had 3 of those 5-year failures. I just hadn't quit. I've had more than 3 failures, and that's what business is all about. But here's my tip and challenge based on that. I coach hundreds and hundreds of leaders a year, and I coach them all to do this: be a self-coach, not a self-critic. Most people are self-critics, right? We look at the failures that we have, and we say, "Oh yeah, my dad was right. Oh yeah, my mom was right. Oh yeah, my friends were right." See, they listen to all those voices that said, "I shouldn't have done that." Paul mentioned that earlier when he's telling his story about Sinventions. People will tell us all the things we shouldn't do, and then when we prove that out, we say, "Yeah, they were right." My coaching to you today is to be a self-coach, and here's how you do that. So the tip is to be a self-coach, not a self-critic. Now let me share with you how. This is the challenge. Every single day, and I do this every single day with my daily compass tool that we've mentioned in the past, have an after-action review. Like this is something I use, learned in the military, and Rick, I'm sure you use it in project management too. Have an after-action review. Every day, what went well? What do you want to do different tomorrow? What do you need to carry forward? See, this is about coaching yourself. Most people, what they do is they get to the end of the day, and all they see is the failures and what they didn't get done. And then they criticize themselves, and then they get up and they do the same thing tomorrow. They come in tomorrow and they say, "I didn't get anything done tomorrow." They start with negativity at the beginning of the day. If you'll learn to have an after-action review at the end of every single day, and the first question you should ask, what went really well today? What did I get accomplished today? This begins to help you self-coach and to create resilience in your life, because you'll see all the things that you did really well, not the 1 or 2 things you didn't do wrong. That's my tip and challenge for our listeners on the Breaking Average podcast today. Paul, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate you guys sitting in the seat here today, and this has been great. I've been taking notes here. I did put, do it afraid and the fear will dissipate, right? So when you do it afraid, the fear's there at the front end, but what happens is it gets swallowed up. So just want to encourage folks with that.
Yeah, and I wanted to give a final thank you nod to Cultivating Courage, right? To our sponsor. We really appreciate them supporting the podcast. And if you would like to support the podcast, please reach out to us. You can find us at breakingaverage.com. There's a lot of great resources out there. You can also nominate leaders for us to talk to, as well as become a sponsor. So visit us at breakingaverage.com.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rick. Paul, Rick, always a pleasure doing these episodes with you guys. I learn as much as I give, right? And that's what I love about having it. It's kind of like our own little mini mastermind every single time we record. So this has been fantastic. We want to just remind our listeners, visit us at breakingaverage.com. Leave your own resilient story on our website. Paul writes a lot of great blog posts. Make sure you go there and visit those, and continue to tune in to the Breaking Average podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.